All right. Hi, everybody. I guess I'm going to talk over here since I think this is where we are. Clearly, we're all in the wrong room because you never put the clerkship talk in the big room, but here we are. Unless, I guess, you add AI to the clerkship, and now it can go in the big room, right? So I'm Mark Olaf. I'm the Vice Chair of Emergency Medicine Education at the Geisinger Commonwealth School of Medicine in Central and Northeastern Pennsylvania. I'm also an Associate Regional Dean for one of the campuses for our medical school. And I'm going to talk to you about where AI is in your clerkship. We'll figure out a little bit together if we're ready for this thing, share some strategies, and share with you a little bit of early implementation that I've done to kind of explore how students are using this, encourage them to kind of wrap their minds around that a little bit, and then maybe we can figure out together where we go from here. So a couple of things. We're going to discuss strengths and limitations of the use of AI in medical education within our clerkships, develop some strategies based upon some guidelines that exist, and articulate and discuss some common tools that might be used by students. I don't have anything to disclose today, no conflicts. So we're going to talk about present use, maybe some limitations here. I'm going to share with you a use case with some student insights, and then at the end we'll do some opportunities and guidance about how we might use AI in clerkships. So where is AI right now? Anybody ever see this? If you're an Epic user, this pop-up window or something like it, right? You get these BPAs, right? This is our former sepsis one. I forget what the statistic was, but it was like less than 10% of these got acknowledged in a meaningful way, and we turned it into something different now. But these are the BPAs. But quite frankly, this is AI, right? This is a computer in the background searching through your patient's medical chart and delivering you some information that the computer thinks is helpful, right? I think I would safely say that this piece of information was almost never helpful to me. You know, the fact that the patient was married didn't really tell me whether they had sepsis or not. But this is early AI, and this is AI that your students are encountering, right? These are tools that exist in the clinical environment. There's actually a little bit of data out there. Epic's machine learning model scans these and actually calculates a likelihood that somebody might get admitted or might deteriorate. So these tools are already integrated in our medical records in various ways. Everybody remember Clippy? There's got to be some people out there, right? Clippy was arguably one of the first iterations of AI that kind of made it to consumers, right? This was the early version, precursor to Siri, Microsoft competitor perhaps, but with Apple. But Clippy's, so AI voice assistants and things like that, we're all very familiar with Siri at this point. Epic is using AI to change the way EHRs work. Sumit Rana, head of research and development, discussed how they're using AI to generate progress notes. Has anybody heard about this? So, you're wearing the microphone, you go into the room, you interview your patient, everything's recorded, transcribed for you. This is happening right now in some hospitals, in some clinics, in some emergency departments. This is real time. So your students may encounter this as they venture out or maybe at your own institution. We certainly can imagine some of the opportunity with this, with transcribing an encounter and saving us on dictation perhaps, or writing notes. We can also all think about the nature of emergency medicine and the encounters we have with patients and with our colleagues and what else might be heard by some of these tools. So something to think about as well. But we know AI is not perfect either. AI has been shown to, and even AI that is included in commercial healthcare tools, including electronic health records, has demonstrated racial bias in particular algorithms. Not very different than perhaps systematic racial biases and gender biases present in other parts of our healthcare system, but certainly AI is not immune to this, and perhaps we're even a little bit more aware of the biases that it may demonstrate. That article is from Science in 2019. AI comes with a couple of pitfalls for us. We've highlighted a couple of them already. But have people heard about things like a product called Turnitin? We probably aren't using it too much in the EM clerkship, right? Students submit papers online, decides if you plagiarized or not. There are tools now that are trying to help teachers decide if a student plagiarized something, but also whether AI generated it. That, I think if you talk to anybody who is involved in AI and kind of exploring this space, would agree that those tools are not refined enough for us to make definitive choices about whether a student used AI to help them create a product. And I would say this would be like a highly discouraged thing right now, that I would not attempt to use a tool to decide if a student used AI or accuse that student or seek any repercussions for that. It's definitely a limitation at this point. There are some of the AI generating tools out there that are generating photos and things like that and videos that are exploring ways to embed watermarks and other identifiers to prove that it was an AI generated image. The problem with that is that you can change the Gaussian sensitivity on that and dial it down a little bit. The image still looks great and the computer can no longer figure out if it's AI generated or real. So there's a lot of pitfalls in using tools to figure out whether students are doing AI generated work. Anybody work at an institution or a school that maybe banned some or all of this? Like last week I just got told that we can use Copilot at work, so like great, we're gonna do something I guess, but lots of places have just banned these tools outright. You know, I think with the Change Health recent data breach and another, the Ascension one last week, I think we can all realize why an institution might choose to do this, because we need to be sure about that we're protecting patient safety. But this is a little bit challenging for me. I think when we ban things kind of wholesale, this is akin to like us pretending like the printing press doesn't exist, right? Like, no, we can only tell the stories, we can't write them down. I don't think that this tool is going away, these sets of tools are going away. We need to kind of face this forward and think about how are we going to use this? This is the way that information is getting shared, disseminated. And they are tools that our students are probably using in some fashion. Here's an interesting conundrum. You know, do you penalize a student for using an AI tool in an assignment that you create? It could be any number of different things, but there are, you know, there's certainly people out there that feel this way. The question could be flipped around on us and say, well, was my assignment a great one to begin with? Maybe this should push me to think about what that assignment truly is. Am I, with whatever assignment I'm performing, really trying to teach a student a set of skills that is going to be clinically applicable in the world that we live in today? You know, if I'm asking them, you know, questions that are knowledge-based to prepare them for an exam that they have to take, that makes a lot of sense. If I'm telling them to write up a patient encounter, but don't use AI because that's cheating, well, tell me why that's cheating. Tell me why, because it's a tool that's out there, and it's integrated into things like a Microsoft suite at this point. So it's a bit of, you know, ignoring the reality, and perhaps there's, you know, I would suggest that there's probably a reason for us to maybe catch up to this and alter some assignments and think about how we're doing this. So that's what I chose to do with my clerkship last year. So our clerkship is conveniently numbered MD911. It was initially a mistake, but I embraced it. So I gave the students an asynchronous AI case. It's actually intended for them to engage with the AI, and the case scenario that they're presented with is summarized here. They get a college student with a headache, a rash, a fever, altered mental status, but they had been drinking the night before, so it kind of clouds the picture a little bit. Some stuff for them to think through. It's a case of meningitis, and they're asked to read the presentation, use a regular search engine, so we tell them to use Google, because you know what, they're doing that anyway. And then they're asked to find an AI tool and ask it to answer some questions. And then they're supposed to share the understanding of how that AI tool works, and then reflect on their experience and share it back with me. And this is all done asynchronously. On a website and captured. So we have a year's worth of students doing this now, and we're entering our second year of having them do this. So we asked them to reflect. So I wanted to share with you some of what my students' perceptions were about using AI in clinical education and clinical care. So student one said, AI tools provide quick, personalized insights based on machine learning and natural language processing. However, they may not fully replace traditional resources that are curated by experts and offer more comprehensive and accurate information, especially in complex medical scenarios. Because student kind of gets it. This kind of makes sense. That's a statement I would agree with in general. They also said, I can integrate AI tools into my learning and future clinical practice in various ways, used for diagnostic reasoning, provide access to updated information, streamline administrative tools, still crucial to critically evaluate AI recommendations, prioritize patient privacy, and engage in ongoing education about AI medicine. I think the student kind of gets where we're at right now. Student two says, AI pulls from the internet, and that's kind of like, it depends on what your view is, but that's not entirely true, so I kind of drew a line through that, but this is a student's perception, and the internet is loaded with false information, so there's clearly a bias the student has against the internet. People should be aware that the info they look up may not be accurate. Other AIs may be catered more towards clinical practitioners, using only peer-reviewed research backing information or clinical guidelines. So one of the things that I take from this, as I'm thinking about how do I move forward and how do I eventually teach students about this, I take this into account and I say, this is a potential, perspective that a student has on what AI is and how it gets used. And so that should inform how I'm going to approach teaching students about AI in the future. Student 3 says, I will not use AI tools in my future practice because I do not trust this tool and fear about the implications for learning and finding. So this is right, so we had, three, the classic bell curve of adoption, right? So we've got somebody that's maybe on, the leading edge a little bit, right? Somebody who is kind of in the middle, and this one is like, this is gonna be our laggard, But important for me to know that, to kind of figure out where do I go from here. Student 4, surprisingly, this is the first time I've created a profile and used a service like this. I'd never been interested in it before because I felt that sources I knew to be reliable would be a better place to go for help. I was also skeptical of the AI's ability to provide accurate, comprehensive medical technical information. However, I was pleasantly surprised at responses. Okay. Student 5. I am sure that eventually one would be able to write up their HPI, PE, and initial lab studies into the AI system, which would then be able to provide a provider with differential diagnosis, initial workup, treatment plan. In the outpatient setting, AI may be able to help with recommending screenings, writing prescriptions, scheduling. Another exciting area that I could see AI doing good in is medication reconciliation and helping decide the optimal medication recommendation for the patient's unique clinical status and to prevent polypharmacy. I believe the same information can be used to create rebuttals to denials of care from insurance replacement. Before any of this is available, it will be imperative to be cautious and meticulous when incorporating AI into one's practice. I would like to give this student honors, at least on this assignment. I think this is very insightful, right? They're looking at systems-based practice. How could this actually make my job better? I still need to protect patient safety. But this student's demonstrating some really good insight and also some really broad and deep aspects of their knowledge related to the clerkship. So we've got lots of choices we can go with this. Obviously, how you implement this in your clerkship can be quite variable. This was just an early kind of exploratory thing that I've done. There is a little bit of guidance on maybe how we should use this. And so I just put these up here as a reference for you guys to kind of read at your leisure. There is an ethical use of artificial intelligence in health professions education guide that Ken Masters wrote. And then there's some other articles regarding the ethical use of AI in medical education. This is an important, a critical foundation for where we go from here. And just as critical is not just its ethical use in education, but also in clinical care. So these are some of the first kind of questions that we have to ask ourselves and begin to solve before we can really take good, effective next steps. There are some, this is a study that was done out of Turkey, and they took, I think, their 3,000 or so students across the country and surveyed them to kind of, they were educators across Turkey, and they asked them about, did a little Delphi study to determine competencies in AI. So there's something out there. People have done some of this work. How translatable that is to US medical education, we could discuss that a little bit more deeply. But they did come up with, a different group came up with introducing artificial intelligence training in medical education and its role. And you can kind of see here from early medical education like the MCAT, there would be a role for it there and the content that it should introduce, medical school core phases, clinical phases, USMLE, appropriate education for residents and then specialists. And there's some suggestions there about how it might be used. There are some tips on how to create your own GPT. So if that's something that you want to encounter, there's ways and instruction manuals that are out there. And as I prepared these slides, months ago, I fully expected that I would encounter many changes to the landscape of AI between the time I prepared them and now. And of course, ChatGPT just announced kind of their newest product this past week with all kinds of new features. I don't think it makes any of these obsolete necessarily, but there's changes happening all the time. So that was just a kind of a brief introduction to kind of lay the landscape, a little bit of some student perceptions about where we are right now. We've got about 5 minutes left. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take them. I don't know if we can get to a microphone or not, but I'll repeat your question. Go ahead.
So, what's going to be your approach when they're in the clinical setting? Like, are you going to tell them that they've done some training with you now?
Yeah.
They can use it in the clinical setting if they want to, or are you encouraging them still, don't use it here, we want to see what you can do on your own?
Yeah. So the question is like, am I encouraging students to use this kind of like in a live clinical setting? So I think first of all, I would say we have our institutional policy would be saying no patient data goes into that, right, into a ChatGPT or anything like that. So that would be number one piece of advice to the student. Number two would be, but if you're asking the broad hypothetical about, what's the best way to manage, ascending cholangitis, the students they're going to go to UpToDate and effectively perform a Google search on UpToDate, right? Or they're going to go to Google. This is another tool in their toolbox, and I don't see, what I do encourage them to do is kind of say, go use that, but then please do compare it to another resource that you trust, right? This is the learning of how to use this, right? And I think one of the fascinating things about AI and using it in medical education is that we are the teachers, right? But we have not been taught how to do this yet. We're kind of making it up as we go to a degree, learning with the students. And so it's an opportunity for us to engage with the students and have a meaningful conversation too. Yeah.
I could use my New York voice.
Sure.
I think if we think back to math where it said show your work,
Yeah.
I think there's an opportunity with ChatGPT where the learner can export their whole discussion
Yes.
with ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that actually is an insight that we don't have into how they think. So
Right.
I had an idea, EMS fellowship. So proposed to the fellow, create a pediatric seizure protocol.
Yeah.
With GPT.
Right.
Straight
right.
up.
Right.
And then show me your work. Like, how did you get to this? And then have a rubric based on their thought process.
Right.
What are your thoughts?
I think that's a great way to engage with the technology. And again, it's that same layer of go experiment with this thing or use it in a way that it's fully intended to be used, right? It's supposed to make this a little bit easier in some way. The challenge that we know is that it's not perfect, and we would want it, especially when it comes to patient care or creating a protocol for a lot of patients that would have potential to affect, we want to make sure we give it a good proofread. But doing that, I think, allows us to learn along with the learner about the best way to maybe use the technology or a way or the way that the learner's using it. And then I think as we go through time, we develop an experience with that, right? And we can say, I've seen last year's fellow do it this way and it didn't work well, but maybe I'll let you go and do your own thing. Maybe I have a little bit of a constructivist viewpoint on education, and I want you to go and experiment with it. That's what a lot of this is. It's kind of you create the knowledge by having the experience, which is a very valid educational theory for the space, and it applies very well. So I would support that. Yeah. One up here. About 2 minutes left.
Hey there, I'm Justin. I'm going into my third year, so this
Great.
is really fascinating to learn about.
Sure.
I guess just kind of a advice on bringing this AI to my attendings, and how do I say I want to try this out, and what if I get mouth resistance? What could I say?
Here you go. That's a fantastic question. So hands in the room. If a student brought this to you on shift and said, I used AI, or I'm going to go use AI to answer the question, who would be satisfied with that approach? We'll just say satisfied. Who would be okay with a student using that? Who would be opposed to a student doing that, and that you really just want your student to generate that knowledge without the tool? Not too many. So there's some, we certainly want you to learn the foundational pieces, right? But at the same time, I think my approach to this, anyway, or my perspective is one of, if you don't know the thing, but you're going to go seek out the knowledge, and you're going to do that in a meaningful way, that's a little bit of, that's all of what medical education is. As you evolve from a college student to a med student to a resident to a lifelong learner, we're hoping that we develop in you at the core an ability to learn and seek out valuable information, then apply it in a way that helps a patient. And so this is just a new approach to that. I would use it with some caution, I think, and I would also be transparent with it and maybe even upfront and ask the question upfront. It's a great question for a clerkship director on a first day or something like that. Are we allowed to use this tool? Are we not? What are the reasons around it? And understanding the system that you're in too, making sure that if you're using it, you're following a system policy for an approach to that. But really good question. All right. Thanks, everybody. I think I'm out of time, but I'm happy I'll be over on the side there. Thank you.